It is now my particular pleasure to invite a special guest to lead us into a time for centering, for quiet prayer, reflection, and meditation. The Reverend Sidney Morris served as minister to the Unitarian Church of Vancouver 20 years ago when I was at Vancouver School of Theology. Sidney was always very kind to we who were students, and I'm so glad that she is here today visiting her grandchild in Vancouver, and I invite Sidney to share some thoughts with us this morning.
Thank you for your kind invitation. I visited our partner church in 1990, the year after the December 24th end of the Ceausescu regime, as we drove in our tour bus, Canadians and Americans, through the beautiful countryside. We saw bulldozers left standing where they were at midnight on December 24th, devastation behind them where all of the village had been flattened, buildings leaning over halfway into devastation right before them, and beyond that, the strong and sturdy villages which had flourished, still standing upright. And when we came with our great big North American bus down the dirt roads of the tiny town, we were greeted by people of all ages. Hands reached out with love. That somewhat disconcerting habit of one's hand being kissed by all the gentlemen nevertheless conveyed great love, great appreciation for our presence. Eager children who had been studying their history and learning about ours reached out and received the little stickers of the view from space that NASA had just put out of this entire beautiful blue planet. Babies whose hands were just learning to grasp. Elders whose gnarled hands had tended the roots of our Unitarian faith. Generation after generation, all came to clasp our hands and to embrace us. 1 in every 4 people at that time had been an informer for the Ceausescu regime. And the healing, the mourning, the reconciliation that was their job, they told us, was aided, deepened by our presence, by our reminder that there was a wider world, that our gratitude for the beauty of their presence, some 80,000 strong, in carrying forward the Unitarian faith, was helpful to them in their healing and helpful to us in our healing. For the experience of losing one's roots is in its own way a suffering. So I invite us to go into a time of silence and contemplation with words from the Unitarian minister who did not make it through the Ceausescu regime, but nonetheless provided inspiration for all of us and generations after. Imre Gellard, he wrote, "Through suffering, we receive powers and qualities. This is born in us unity and solidarity, strong faith, and adequate self-knowledge, a sense of historical orientation. Somehow we have escaped from the spirit of resignation and desperation to produce one of the most optimistic, constructive, and humanistic religious systems. So I say to you, God does not expect you to save the world. Your mandate is but one single human being. It may be just yourself, maybe your neighbor. We are not expected to have more than we are capable of being. Each word of comfort you give, every act of compassion, is a small bonfire in the thundering nights. By these tiny flickering flames, the simple gestures of loving hearts all add up and will eventually save our world. Salvation is not something we have to wait for, but something we must do something about because we can. Because we can, therefore we must."
This is a dialogue sermon. Many voices together expand our truth. It's my great pleasure to invite the chair of Partner Church Committee, Brian Welwood, to come forward and begin our conversation.
Good morning, everyone. I've had the pleasure to serve on this committee for a number of years, along with Diane Noble and Paul Sangaila and Kay Welwood and Kay Wagner. We're the current group that's serving on the committee, and it's a great joy. This is the city in which our partner church is located, and it's pronounced just the way it looks. Hod Mezo Vasharhe. So there you go. First, I'd just like to read a few excerpts from a letter that we got from our partner church minister and his wife. Now, they have been serving for almost 28 years, I think it is, at that same congregation. So they have been there quite a number of years before we entered a partnership with them just shortly after the fall of communism. So here's part of what letter they wrote to us just before Christmas. We have so many beautiful common memories and experiences, and they were all about how nice it was to be together. If you have a little time, please write us about yourselves. How has your church life formed since the arrival of the new reverend? We welcome her as well with respect. Previously, we had mentioned to you that Mishi, that's the minister, those who know him and love him call him Mishi. His name is Mihai Kish, Mishi to his family and friends. We had already mentioned to you that Mishi had reached his retirement age and that his service activity was prolonged for one more year. The other day we were informed about the fact that his service activity was prolonged again for one more year, which means that he can retire in May of 2017. We are forced to leave this big house behind, and we still cannot decide whether to stay in Hod Mezővásárhely or move to the countryside near Budapest where our children live and be near them. Our hearts say to move nearer to our children, but I still have to work for 7 more years until I can retire. As Mishi cannot stay here further, meaning in the house, this encourages us to fulfill new plans. For us, it's important to do our best for our congregation in the remaining 1.5 years. We have new plans, and we hope that our enthusiasm and impulse will be persistent as well, and we will try to renovate our cemetery's vacant official residence and the ruined building in its yard. This means another serious task, but we believe that by doing it we can improve our congregation's life. We find it is important that after renewing the church, our cemetery should be well kept as well. By doing it, we can express our respect toward our ancestors who made sacrifices for us and created the congregation of this place. We would like to remark that a Unitarian cemetery was created because in 1879 the Unitarians could not be buried in other denomination cemeteries because of religious intolerance. A bunch of personal things, and then we wish you and your congregation a Merry Christmas and a happy and peaceful New Year. With love, Mishi, Tunde, and Balint. Balint is their youngest son who still lives with them. When we first partnered with them, one of the big issues in their life was the surgery that he needed for a brain tumor and how they were going to pay for it and where it was going to be done, and they eventually went to Germany and had that surgery performed. And he has some disabilities, but he's a wonderful young man and a productive young man, and he's working at the local library. So in 1994, I just want to give you a little history of our partnership together. In 1994, at I think it was a PNWD annual meeting, several of us went down there, and some people went to the partner church seminar and came back, especially with Harold Rosen and Rob Bodie were two of the ones that said, we really should consider a partnership with a church in Transylvania, Hungary. And we had a vote, and the congregation decided that that would be a great idea. This was, really shortly after the whole partner church movement has started. Probably about 1993, the first formal partnerships were engaged or re-engaged, because there had been some before communism. And so Rob Bodie, Mary Simons, and Stuart were early members of that committee. Diane Noble, myself, the O'Hanlons, Anna Sumpton. And so those were the ones who really started working toward this partnership. And not long after that, in 1995, there was an International Association of Religious Freedom conference here in Vancouver, and it's a worldwide association of sort of liberal religious thinkers who come together every couple of years somewhere in the world. And so that conference was here, and we brought the minister and his wife over for that conference and to meet all of us, and they stayed with us for about a week and had a wonderful time. It was a beautiful week weather-wise, and they got to experience what it's like to be in the Vancouver area in the wonderful summer. So I know they had a great time, and we did get to know them quite a bit then. Mishi doesn't speak hardly any English, and Tunde, her English is halting, but not bad once she gets warmed up anyway. She can certainly communicate. The next sort of big event in our lives anyway, Kay and I and Kelty Bassett, a member of this church at the time, went on a partner church tour, and this one was the first one they'd done just within Hungary. So we went on that tour with the UU Partner Church Council's travel group, a guy named John Dale, who is a retired, I don't know what he did in his early life. I think he might have been an investment banker or something like that. But he makes a wonderful tour guide. And his wife, Chila, is a Hungarian-Romanian Unitarian, whose father, I think, was a minister too. And so they were our tour guides. And we had a wonderful tour around Hungarian Unitarian churches and got to meet many of them. We got to meet Tunde's brother and sister in Győr, which is up near to Vienna, and got to meet them and stayed with the brother. Then in between, sometime in here, and I'm not sure who all went. I know the Simons family went and to our partner church village probably before we were in partnership with them. The Bosworths have been, Matt and Alicia, Matt Burke and his wife Alicia have been for a visit. Leslie Girodi and her son went for a visit. So several people had been for visits either before or after this tour that we went on. in 2009, we had, all these years in between, we had been raising money, sending money to them for various projects, mostly to do with trying to restore their church, trying to get them some revenue from their property. So they put in 2 suites into their house, one at one end of the house and one at the one end of the fellowship hall, to provide revenue for them, because they got very little revenue from the ministry itself. And until Tunde started working full-time outside the home, they really were scraping by. So they now have 2 revenue suites on the property that have helped them and will help a new minister who comes along. So Kay and I were going on a trip to Europe, and it happened that they had the celebration of the completion of the restoration of their church about the time we planned to go. So we made a point of getting to that, and it was a huge deal. There were television cameras there, the local choir sang, the place was packed. There were ministers from all over Transylvania and Hungary that came to this service. It was about a 2.5-hour long service, all in Hungarian. And we enjoyed every minute of it, didn't we, Kay? Yeah. So it was great. And we got to get up there, and we presented them with a plaque that we'd had carved by our well, there was, I guess it had been before we sent a plaque that had been carved by a local craftsman, made out of 1,000-year-old western yellow cedar, I think it was. And we took along on that trip or the next trip, I can't remember which, a beautiful carved hands by Maurice Gibbons. Anyway, I got to present them with a check to help along with their further work, and it was a wonderful weekend. And at that time, we were fortunate to stay in their suite. The renter hadn't been there for a while, and he was off in England or somewhere, so we got to stay in their suite. With all of Mishi's family were in the house, so we got to spend a wonderful weekend with all of them, and really, really get to know them on that trip. So it was very shortly after that, in 2010, only 8 months later, that we had already been planning this choir trip. So we had a choir trip with Allison and 16 singers and about another 9 or 10 spouses and people that came along just for the tour. And we had a wonderful tour of Budapest and Hódmezővásárhely, plus several cities within Transylvania. So we sort of went on a little circuit of the holy places in Transylvania, and saw the citadel in Deva where Francis David was imprisoned and eventually died. It was a wonderful trip, and it was really eye-opening, and life-changing is a word that people use for trips like this, where they really try and understand what the roots are of our faith. And one of the things that struck me the most was in Kolozsvár, which is the Unitarian sort of capital there, where the Unitarian school is and the divinity school. We started off with this fantastic evening of singing. We sang in the church, and then after that we got invited to the bishop's residence, and they plied us with palinka and a fantastic musical and dancing show for quite a long time, some more palinka, and then finally at about 10 o'clock we got fed. I thought we were just going to have snacks, they said, but they had a full feast on for us. It was a wonderful, wonderful evening, and wonderful hospitality. The next day we had a chance to tour the school, and we met in the consistory. I think the room is the consistory, or the group is the consistory. Anyway, we met where the bishop has a council in Transylvania, the Unitarian bishop. We have a bishop. They are elected, but we have Unitarian bishops. And so he has a council that advises, and they vote on various things in the operation of the church. So we're meeting in this in this room where there's all the pictures on the wall of all the bishops going back hundreds and hundreds of years. And this is where they meet to make their decisions. And we had a very well-spoken, 40-something man speaking to us, and I believe he was an instructor at the school. And, of course, questions come around about the differences between the way we do Unitarianism and the way they do Unitarianism. And we had already knew that there were quite stark differences. They are very much Christian Unitarians, but not Trinitarians. They have a catechism. Their kids are baptized. They say a catechism and are questioned before the congregation by the assembled ministers. It's a very, it doesn't change from century to century very much at all. So we were talking with this guy who spoke great English. He'd been to America many times. He knew a lot about the way that we in North America have fashioned our faith. And we were asking him about, why is it that the Transylvanian and the Hungarian Unitarians have stayed so stable in their faith all these years and haven't, sort of like we had, adapted to the modern times and so forth. And he said that they can't. They really feel like they cannot do that. For years, they have had their language under siege by the Romanians, who tried to get rid of the Hungarians, the Hungarian language. Their culture for all of these Hungarian Unitarians was constantly under siege, and they were a minority language, they're a minority culture, and their faith. The Unitarians are not a big faith group within either Hungary or Transylvania. So that had been under siege all these years. They said, we really feel that if we were to not hang on to our history and our culture and our heritage, that we would lose it all. We would just disappear. We would be assimilated into the local culture, and that would be the end of us. And that's why we haven't, we just don't feel like we can change. So that was an eye-opener. That's it's totally different than the way we're allowed to operate so freely, and if we can make whatever changes we think are necessary within our own consciences and within the polity of the congregations. We have the right to do that, but they couldn't. So that was quite a surprise. So that was 2010. Then 2014, which is just a year and a half ago, was our 20th anniversary of our partnership, and we raised the money to bring Mishi and Tunde and their son Balint over for a week-long visit. And that was again really wonderful. This time we had them in our home for 3 nights, I think, and they were 4 nights in Leslie Girody's home. And so we shared them. We had them scheduled for an event just about every single evening, and we got to see a lot of them. And again, get to renew acquaintances and renew our friendships. And I know that they really appreciated that. They also serve, there's a congregation in the city of Szeged, which is about 22 kilometers away from Hódmezővásárhely. They don't have a church building there, but there's a small congregation there that Reverend Keisha also serves, and their partner is the South Fraser congregation. So they did, on the last day they were here, went out to the South Fraser congregation and met some of the people there and stayed a night there. So Mishi is retiring finally in 2017. He was supposed to retire last year. So I thought, what better? It's going to be 7 years since we were last there. It really is time for another choir tour. So that's what we're going to plan to do. So probably late May, early June 2017, We'd like to take a group of as many of us as we can along to sing, and as many people as would like to come along as we can get. It was wonderful for those people that were not part of the choir. They got to see all the same things we did, plus a whole bunch more because they weren't practicing. So they did get to go out and see some more of the sights. Budapest, which is one of the places we will go for sure, is a fantastic city for any of you that haven't been there. It's just a jewel of Europe. It's very much like Prague in that it has on one side of the river is the castle district, and on the other side of the river is the more commercial district, and their parliament. You've seen, I'm sure, thousands of times by now, the pictures of the Budapest Parliament on the edge of the Danube, all those commercials we see for the river cruises. Most of them go to Budapest now. It's a beautiful city. We haven't decided yet where we'll go in addition to that, and that'll depend on who's coming. So we could very well go to Prague. We could very well go back to parts of Transylvania we didn't go to. We might do more tour of the other parts of Hungary, where there's some beautiful cities there too. Debrecen comes to mind, where we went on our first tour, and Eger is this beautiful little city up in the northern part that's part of wine country. So we don't quite know where we'll go until we get people expressing interest. But please do let me know if you're at all interested, and we'll get that going. So that would also give us the chance to say goodbye to Mihai and Tunde after their 30 years of service and our 23 or so years of partnership with them. And I don't know if the new minister might even be there. We could start a relationship with a new minister. So keep that in mind. Lastly, I just received yesterday, I guess, another letter from them after I had told them that this is what could be in the plans, another trip there. And here's what Tunde's usually the one who writes, and her sister translates for her and sends it on. We were just dreaming about the fact that we can meet each other again in our lifetime. It is a fantastic idea that you are willing to undertake this big journey just for the fact to be together here with us. You are wonderful people and really good friends. We haven't even thought about the date when we should have this farewell, but now you reinforce in us the belief that we shouldn't just simply say goodbye, but we really should leave behind our 30 years and an active life with nice experiences, with solemn feelings, surrounded by our beloved, as young couples do when they attach their packs behind them. I don't know exactly what that means, but you can figure it out. Then we will have to set off with firm steps and start our new life. Spring has arrived here as well. Our snowdrops and crocuses were wonderful in the garden. Mishi has already had the temptation to do some gardening. You asked us about the house which is situated in the cemetery. Yes, there is a 3-roomed house which has always been inhabited by those who looked after and maintained order in the cemetery. By now it has become vacant, but to be able to find somebody to live there, we should renovate it just a little bit. We'd like to put it in good order. And now to answer your question, this was to do with when we would come. We would say it's up to you. Early May to early June is just fine. Answering your question whether I can have early retirement or not, I have to say no, because I would get a low pension, and Mishi's pension is also low. We are really looking forward to hearing news from you. Till then, we are sending our best regards to you. With love, Tunde and Mishi. So, thank you so much. All this month is all of the 100% of the contributions go to our partner church. They really put it to good use. Thank you so much for all your support over all these years.